What if the person who poured your coffee every morning, who sat beside you on the porch while the bees hummed low across the field, who looked you straight in the eye and said, "Brother, I got you," what if he was the one slowly taking you apart? Not with a knife, with silence, with patience. And what if the worst part wasn't what he stole? It was that you handed it to him, smiling. Welcome back to the channel. Grab your coffee, settle in, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing. They just chose otherwise. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and stick around. You are going to want to hear this one through. I want you to imagine the deepest sleep of your life. Not the restless kind where you wake up at 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling, counting the things you should have said to people who stopped listening years ago. I mean the kind of sleep that feels like sinking into warm river water. Slow. Still. The kind where the entire world could split open outside your window, and you would not hear it crack. That is how I slept on the third morning at the cabin in the Ozarks. And I remember thinking, before I even opened my eyes, this is what peace is supposed to feel like. I was 59 years old, recently retired from 26 years of teaching high school chemistry in Springfield, Missouri. The kind of teacher who kept a periodic table shower curtain in the faculty bathroom and thought it was hilarious. The kind of man who, after his wife passed, decided the most logical next chapter was to spend his remaining years talking to bees. I am not being poetic. I literally talked to them. Ruth, my wife, she used to say that was the only thing that made me tolerable. That I could hold a conversation with something that had no interest in responding and somehow still walk away feeling like I had been heard. She passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic, fast and cruel the way that particular disease always is. And after that, I did what a lot of men my age do when the person who made their house a home is no longer standing in the kitchen. I got very quiet and very busy, and I pretended those two things were the same as being okay. The bees helped. The honey helped more. And my kids, Josie and Micah, they helped most of all, even when I made it difficult, which according to Josie was often. This trip was their idea. A cabin up in the Ozarks, deep in the hills where the cell service disappeared about 40 minutes before you arrived, and the trees were so thick the sky felt like a suggestion. 5 days. Just the 3 of us. They called it an early 60th birthday present, which I pointed out was factually inaccurate since my birthday was still 3 months away. Josie told me to stop being a chemist about it and just say thank you. So I did. Josie was 32. Chemical engineer. Worked for a firm in Kansas City that did something with polymers. I pretended to understand at Thanksgiving dinners. She had her mother's face and her mother's instincts and my unfortunate habit of needing to be right about everything. She was the kind of woman who showed up to a vacation with a color-coded itinerary and a backup itinerary in case the first one encountered weather. She did not sleep in. She did not leave things unplanned. She did not forget. Micah was 28, investigative reporter for a regional paper out of Joplin. Quiet the way some people are quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they are always listening. He had this habit of almost smiling at something and then stopping himself like he was saving it. Ruth used to say Micah collected smiles the way other people collected stamps. Carefully, sparingly, only the ones worth keeping. So when I woke up on that third morning and the lodge was silent, I noticed. Not the peaceful kind of silent, where you know someone is just in the next room reading or making eggs. The heavy kind. The kind that has furniture in it. I sat up. My back reminded me, as it did every single morning, that I had not been 35 in a very long time. I called out, "Josie." Then louder, "Micah." Nothing. The kind of nothing that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. I pulled on my flannel shirt and walked out into the main room. Both beds made. Not just made. Made the way Josie made things, corners tight, pillows centered, like the bed owed her something and she was collecting. Her duffel bag. Gone. Micah's jacket. The one he had hung on the hook by the door since the first afternoon, gone. The car keys we had left on the small wooden peg by the entrance, gone. My phone, gone. My wallet, gone. I stood on that cold hardwood floor in my socks, and I did something I am not proud of. I laughed, out loud, to no one, because my first thought, and I need you to understand how deeply I believed this, was that my children were pranking me. I walked to the window expecting to see Micah crouched behind the truck trying not to laugh, with Josie standing nearby pretending she had nothing to do with it while absolutely being the architect of the entire operation. The driveway was empty. The truck was gone. The road, a single lane of red Ozark dirt cutting through oak and pine, was empty in both directions as far as I could see. I checked every drawer, every cabinet, under the mattresses, in the bathroom, in the small closet that smelled like cedar and someone else's decade. I was looking for a note, a phone, a joke, a reason. Something that would let me keep standing on the logical explanation, the way I had stood on logical explanations my entire life. 26 years of chemistry taught me that every reaction has a cause. Find the catalyst. Identify the compound. The answer is always in the structure. But the structure of this morning had a hole in it. And standing in that cabin alone, surrounded by hills that did not care about my confusion, I could feel myself falling through it. I told myself they went for supplies. Forgot a note. Would be back by noon with coffee. And a reasonable explanation, and Josie would walk through that door and say something like, "Honestly, Dad, we were gone for 40 minutes, and I would feel embarrassed for the panic, and we would never speak of it again." Noon came, then 2, then 5. I ate the only things left in the kitchen. A sleeve of crackers and a can of tomato soup I heated on the stove, because at least they had left the gas on. Small mercies. And then, standing at the counter washing the single pot I had used, I found it. The only thing in that entire cabin that was not supposed to be there. Sitting on the windowsill above the sink, half hidden behind a curtain, was a small glass jar of honey. Not store-bought, homemade, the kind I made. The kind I had been making for 3 years on my little plot outside Springfield, with my bees and my smoker and my best friend Frank Hubbard, standing beside me every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, like clockwork. There was a label on the jar. Handwritten. Small, careful letters I recognized immediately because I had seen them on birthday cards and grocery lists and school permission slips for 18 years. It was Josie's handwriting. 3 words. "Remember this smell, Dad?" I held the jar in both hands and stood there for a long time, because something was happening inside my chest that I did not have a chemical formula for. Something between recognition and dread. The feeling you get when a door opens in a house you were absolutely certain was empty. I opened the jar. I did it slowly, the way you open something when your hands already know what is inside but your brain has not caught up yet. The lid gave a soft pop, and the smell hit me before I was ready for it. Wildflower, clover, that faint warm undertone that people who have never kept bees always describe as just honey, but anyone who has ever stood over a frame dripping with the stuff knows it is never just anything. Honey carries the field it came from. The season. The rain. The particular angle of light that month. This jar smelled like home. Like the 3 acres outside Springfield where I had spent the last few years building something quiet and small and mine. But underneath the sweetness, there was something else. Something I could not name but could feel. The way you feel a word sitting on the tip of your tongue that refuses to come forward. Not a smell. Exactly. A shadow of one. Like stand you come here and where someone has just blown out a candle and the smoke is already gone but the air still remembers it was there. I brought the jar to my nose and breathed in deeper. And for exactly 3 seconds, I was somewhere else. I was standing in my apiary. Late afternoon. The light coming in gold and sideways through the tree line. The smoker was going. That low, steady breath of white curling up between the hive boxes, and Frank was beside me. Frank Hubbard. My best friend for 30 years. My business partner. The man who had shown up at my door 2 weeks after Ruth's funeral, with a 6-pack and absolutely no intention of talking about feelings. Which was exactly the right move. And he knew it. Frank was holding the smoker. angling it down into the frames, and he was saying something I could not quite hear. His mouth was moving, but the words were wrapped in cotton. And there was a smell coming off that smoke that was not cedar, not burlap, not any fuel I recognized. Something sweet and chemical and wrong. Then it was gone. All of it. The apiary, the light, Frank's face. I was back in the cabin holding a jar of honey with my heart doing something my chest did not appreciate. I set the jar down on the counter very carefully. The way you set down something that might be more dangerous than it looks. I pressed my fingers to my temples. What was that? I knew that place. I knew that feeling. That specific standing in the sun but something is off feeling. But the details would not hold still. Like trying to read a sign through fog. You can see the shape of the letters but not what they spell. I told myself what I always told myself when my brain did something I could not explain. I told myself it was stress, dehydration, low blood sugar. The neurochemistry of fear is well documented. I taught it for 26 years. Cortisol floods the prefrontal cortex, disrupts memory retrieval, pulls up old files at random. Your brain is not broken, Emmett. It is just scared. I believed that. I should not have. The rest of that day moved the way time moves when you are alone and waiting for something that is not coming. Slowly, and with too much room for thinking. I walked the perimeter of the cabin 4 times. Counted the trees along the dirt road like they were going to tell me something useful. They did not. Deeply unhelpful, those trees. I walked down to the road and stood there for the better part of an hour, waiting for a car, a truck, a lost hiker, anyone. The Ozarks in autumn are beautiful. The way empty churches are beautiful. Gorgeous and absolutely indifferent to whether you are there or not. By late afternoon, I had eaten the crackers and opened a second can of soup. I sat on the porch steps and watched the sky do that thing it does in the hills, turning from pale blue to amber to that deep bruised purple that looks like the sky itself took a hit and is deciding whether to go down. And I let myself think the thing I had been pushing away all day. My children did this deliberately, not forgot me, not got lost, not had an emergency that pulled them away at dawn with no time for a note. This was planned. The beds made with Josie's precision. The food left in measured amounts. The gas still on. My wallet and phone taken so I could not call or leave. Every detail accounted for. This was not a disappearance. This was architecture. I said that word out loud because it felt important. Architecture. Someone had designed this morning. Someone had drawn the blueprints for me waking up alone in this cabin with nothing but crackers and honey and questions. And the thing about architecture, and I say this as a man who spent his career understanding how things are built and how they come apart, is that it always reveals the architect. I just could not see them yet. That night, I slept on the couch with every light in the cabin on. I am not too proud to admit that. 59 years old, former educator, grown man, every single light blazing like I was trying to keep something out, or keep something in. I was not sure which. Somewhere around midnight, I heard a car on the dirt road. I was off that couch so fast I nearly took the coffee table with me. My shin would remember that moment for a week. I stumbled to the window and pressed my face against the glass, and for one full second I was certain it was them, and Josie's truck. Micah in the passenger seat, probably pretending he had not been worried. The headlights swept across the tree line and kept going. The car did not slow down. It disappeared around the bend in the road, and the dark swallowed it whole, and I stood at that window long after the sound of the engine faded, staring into the black between the pines. Stay with me here. Because what I found next changed the direction of everything. If this story has gotten under your skin even a little, do me one quick favor. Hit that subscribe button. Most people watching right now have not done it yet, and it costs you nothing. But it means everything to keeping stories like this one coming. Thank you. Genuinely. I turned away from the window. The cabin was quiet in that way that only places surrounded by miles of nothing can be quiet. Not silent, full of small sounds, the settling of wood, something alive in the walls. My own breathing, which I had apparently been doing louder than necessary for some time. And that is when I saw it. The television set. Old, boxy, the kind with the thick back that weighs more than a person should ever have to carry up a mountain. It had been sitting in the corner of the main room since we arrived, unplugged and irrelevant, the kind of object your eyes learn to skip over, because it is just part of the furniture. But it was not unplugged. I could see now, in the light of every lamp I had turned on, a thin cable running from the back of the set to the wall outlet. And on the side, barely visible, a small USB drive plugged into a port I had not known the television even had. A tiny green light on the drive, blinking. Slow, steady, patient. It had been there for 3 days. Plugged in since before I woke up on that first silent morning, waiting. The way a letter waits in a drawer for the right hands to find it. The way a confession waits for the moment you are finally ready to hear it. I reached for the power button, and the screen came to life. The face looking back at me was mine, but wrong. Thinner than it should have been. Cheekbones I had not seen on myself since the year Ruth was sick, when I forgot to eat for days at a time, and the only person who would have noticed was lying in a hospital bed. The eyes on the screen were mine, same muddy green, same slight droop on the left side, but these eyes were not tired. They were terrified. The man on the screen was sitting in my living room in Springfield. My armchair. My bookshelf with the periodic table poster Josie gave me as a joke that I hung without irony. My ugly yellow lamp that Ruth bought at a garage sale, and that I kept because throwing it away would have felt like discarding a Tuesday afternoon with her. He was me, 8 months younger and 10 years older. And then he spoke. If you are watching this, it means you forgot again. This time, watch the whole thing. Do not turn it off. I know you are going to want to. I know something in your head is going to tell you this is not real, that you are confused, that there is a logical explanation. There is a logical explanation. That is why you need to keep watching. I sat down on the floor in front of that television because my legs had decided they were done participating. I sat there and I watched myself talk to myself, and I need you to understand how that feels. It feels like finding a letter in your own handwriting that you have no memory of writing. It feels like the ground beneath you has not moved, but your entire relationship with it has changed. Video Emmett pressed his hands flat on his knees. The way I do when I need to appear more composed than I feel. His voice steadied itself. The way a man's voice steadies when falling apart becomes a luxury he cannot afford. His name is Frank Hubbard, he said. And I watched my own mouth say my best friend's name like it was a diagnosis. Your partner. The man who stood next to you at Ruth's funeral and said nothing because he knew silence was what you needed. That Frank. I need you to hear this because you have heard it before, and you forgot, and that is not your fault. That is what he has been doing to you. He has been putting it in the smoke. Every time you work the hives together. That sweet smell that is not quite right. The one you noticed once, and then stopped noticing because he told you it was a new cedar blend from the supplier in Branson. That is not cedar, Emmett. That is what has been eating your memory. The room was very still. The television hummed, and for one disorienting second the hum sounded exactly like bees. There is a compound, the video continued. Josie took a sample from the smoker and ran it through her lab. Something close to scopolamine but modified. Slower, cumulative. You breathe it in small doses over months, and it does not make you sick. It just takes the last 72 hours and folds them up and puts them somewhere you cannot reach. You wake up Thursday morning, and you do not remember Wednesday. And the man who did it is standing in your kitchen making coffee and asking how you slept. I pressed both hands against the floor because everything inside me was tilting. Your land, Emmett. The 3 acres. There is lithium under it. A significant deposit. Frank found out through a woman named Cynthia Ramirez, a real estate attorney in Springfield. She has been filing transfer documents. You signed them, but you did not know what you were signing because every time Frank put paper in front of you, you had just spent an afternoon breathing whatever he loaded into that smoker. He has taken 4 parcels already. 2 more to go. After that, you will have nothing. and you will not remember you ever had anything. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eye sockets and made a sound that was not a word, just air leaving a man who had run out of room for it. Video Emmett wiped his eyes. Quick, almost angry about it. Josie found it. She came home and knew something was wrong. Said I was repeating questions. Said my eyes looked like I was standing behind glass. She took me to a neurologist in Springfield, Dr. Lena Calloway. They found the compound in my blood. Then Josie went to the apiary and pulled a sample from the smoker herself. He paused, swallowed hard. Micah knows. He recognized the financial structure, the shell transfers, the forged signatures. He has federal contacts from his reporting work. They are building a case. But they need you, Emmett. If this goes to court, they need you on that stand remembering everything. So this time, do not fight it. Let the memories come. Josie says the compound clears the system in 72 hours without re-exposure. That is why they are taking you to the cabin. To get you away from the smoke, away from Frank. To let your brain do what it has been trying to do for 2 years. He leaned closer. Close enough that I could see the small scar above his left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when he was 11. My scar. My terrified eyes looking through 8 months of time directly into mine. You are not losing your mind. Someone took it from you. And your children are bringing it back. The screen went black. I sat on that floor staring at the dead television, and the silence in the cabin was so total I could hear my own pulse behind my ears. Then I noticed something. In the corner of the screen, small white text. A file menu. The USB did not contain one file. It contained 2. The first was labeled in Josie's careful formatting. For Dad, watch first. The second had no name. Just a date from 6 months ago. And a file type I recognized from Micah's reporting work. Audio recording. I clicked it. The voice that came through the speakers was not mine. It was warm and familiar. The voice of the man who had called me brother for 30 years. Who had poured my coffee and sat on my porch and looked me in the eye more times than I could count. But the tone was something I had never heard from Frank Hubbard. Not once in 3 decades. Cold. Flat. Clinical. The way you talk about a piece of equipment that has outlived its function. And the first thing he said was this. The old man will not remember a thing by morning. We are clear to move on the 5th parcel. I sat in the dark, and I listened to my best friend. Discuss me the way you discuss a problem that needs solving. And somewhere in my chest, in the place where 30 years of trust had been living, something cracked. Not broke. Cracked. The way a bone does before it fully gives. You feel the fracture line first. The collapse comes after. The recording kept going. Frank's voice, the one I thought I knew better than almost anyone's except Ruth's, was talking to someone on the phone. A woman. Her voice was clipped and professional. The kind of voice that bills by the hour and does not waste syllables. The 5th parcel is ready, Frank said. I just need him to sign one more set. I will bring it over Thursday after we work the hives. He will be pliable by then. Pliable. That is the word he used. The way you describe wood. The way you describe something you intend to bend. The woman, who I understood now was Cynthia Ramirez, asked about the timeline. Frank laughed. Not his real laugh. Not the one I knew from 30 years of sitting on porches and splitting firewood and standing in silence at a funeral neither of us was ready for. This was a different sound entirely. Thin. Efficient. The laugh of a man who has stopped pretending to himself that what he is doing requires pretending. He is not going to be a problem, Frank said. He does not even know what day it is half the time. Honestly, Cynthia, it is almost too easy. I feel bad about it sometimes. Then I remember what that lithium survey said the land is worth, and I stop feeling bad real quick. I pulled the USB out of the television. Not gently. I pulled it out the way you pull a splinter from under your nail, fast and angry and wanting it gone. I stood in the middle of that dark cabin, and I held the drive in my fist and I breathed. And the memories came. Not slowly. Not in pieces. Not like water filling a room the way they had been trickling since I opened that jar of honey. This time, they came like a wall, like a levee breaking, like every locked door in my head, decided at the same moment that doors were no longer the policy. I remembered the apiary, Tuesday afternoon, late summer, Frank loading the smoker while I suited up. The smell, sweet and sharp and wrong, curling up from the fuel chamber. Me saying once, that is a different blend, and Frank saying without missing a beat, new supplier out of Branson, same stuff just smells different, and me nodding, because why would I not nod? Why would I question the man who had been standing beside me since before my hair went gray? I remembered the kitchen table, papers spread out, Frank leaning over my shoulder, pointing at a signature line. Just insurance updates, M. Same as last year. Sign here and here. And I signed because my hands felt heavy and my head felt like it was wrapped in gauze. And Frank was there, and Frank handled things, and Frank had always handled things. I remembered him at Ruth's funeral, standing 3 feet behind me at the graveside, while everyone else crowded in with their casseroles and their condolences and their unbearable need to say something. Frank said nothing. He stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets. And he waited until everyone left, and then he walked over and put his hand on my shoulder and kept it there for a long time. No words, just wait, just presence. And I remembered thinking, in that moment, that Frank Hubbard was the most decent man I had ever known. The memories kept coming, and I let them, because what else could I do? I remembered Josie, sitting on the edge of my bed, 8 months ago, her voice low and steady the way it gets when she is terrified, but has decided that being terrified is not going to stop her from doing what needs doing. She looked so much like Ruth in that moment that it hurt in a place I did not know still had feeling. Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is going to sound impossible, but I need you to hear it while you can, because tomorrow you might not remember I said it. And I had listened. In that window of clarity, that 72-hour gap between doses when my brain was briefly and desperately my own, I had listened to my daughter tell me that my best friend was poisoning me. And I had believed her. Not because the evidence was overwhelming, although it was. Because Josie has her mother's eyes and her mother's instincts, and when Ruth looked at you and told you something was wrong, you did not argue. You listened. And then you acted. So I had acted. I sat in front of that camera, and I recorded a message to the version of myself who would wake up in a cabin in the Ozarks with no memory of any of it. I gave him everything I had, every detail, every name, every date, because I knew, sitting in that chair, that by Thursday afternoon Frank would load the smoker again, and by Friday morning the man who recorded that video would be gone, and the man who replaced him would not know he had ever existed. I walked out of the cabin. The night air hit me like cold water. I stood under the Ozark sky, more stars than I had seen in years, and I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth, and I cried. Not for Frank. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry for the man who called me brother while he stole the ground from under my feet. I cried for Ruth, because Ruth used to sit on the porch in the evenings when the bees were settling and say, "The bees always know who is real, Emmett. They sting the ones who pretend." And she had been right. She had always been right. And she was not here to say it now, and that was the part I could not bear. If this story has reached somewhere under your ribs, take 1 second and hit that like button. Share it with someone who understands what it means to trust the wrong person. And if you have not subscribed yet, now would be a fine time. Thank you, truly. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I went back inside. I drank water from the tap, because it was that or nothing. And I turned the television to a live channel, not the USB broadcast. Whatever signal that old antenna on the roof could pull from the hills. The picture was grainy, static around the edges. A national news broadcast, the kind that runs through the night with rotating headlines and anchors who look like they have not been outside in several days. I was not watching. I was just letting the sound fill the cabin so the silence would stop pressing against me. And then I saw the name, bottom of the screen. White letters on a red banner scrolling left to right. Springfield businessman Frank Hubbard, sought by federal authorities in connection with land fraud, document falsification, and chemical assault. I sat down very slowly. I read it again and again. The words did not change. Chemical assault. I looked at the screen, and I looked at the face they were showing. Frank's driver's license photo, the one where he is almost smiling the way he always almost smiled. And I felt something I had not felt in 2 years. Not because I had not wanted to feel it, but because every time the feeling tried to form, the smoke had come and folded it up and put it somewhere I could not reach. I felt clear. Precisely. Entirely. Chemically clear. 30 years. That is what I said to the empty room. Not his name, not a curse, just the number, because that is how long I had let a man stand in my life like he belonged there, like he had earned the space. And the thing about 30 years is that it is long enough to build something real, long enough that when you finally see what was growing underneath it, you cannot just cut it away clean. The roots go too deep. They are wrapped around things you still need. I sat in front of that television, with Frank's face on the screen, and I let the rest of it come. Not the explosive memories. Those had already broken through in the last hour. These were the quieter ones. The ones that hurt worse because they were not dramatic. They were just true. Ruth died on a Wednesday in April. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and merciless, the way that particular disease operates, like it has somewhere else to be and cannot waste time on kindness. She was diagnosed in January and gone by spring. I held her hand at the end and she looked at me and said, "Emmett, promise me you will not just sit in that house and disappear." And I promised. And then I sat in the house and disappeared. Frank showed up on day 16. I remember the number because I had been counting the days since the funeral. The way you count anything when counting is the only structure you have left. He came with a 6-pack of something cheap and 2 lawn chairs he pulled from the back of his truck. He set them up on the porch without asking, handed me a beer without speaking, and sat down beside me. We stayed like that for 2 hours. He never once asked me how I was doing, which was the most merciful thing anyone had done for me in 16 days. That was the Frank I trusted. That was the version of the man I had built 30 years of friendship around. And I need you to understand that version was not entirely fiction. That is what makes this impossible to carry. If every moment had been a performance, I could hate him simply. But some of those evenings on the porch were real. Some of those silences were genuine. And the man who sat with me on day 16 and said nothing because nothing was the only honest thing to say, I believe that man existed. I believe he meant it. I just also believe he looked at a geological survey 8 months later and decided that meaning it was not worth $4 million. The bees were his idea. About 3 months after Ruth passed, Frank drove out to my place with a stack of books on beekeeping and a second-hand smoker he had bought at an estate sale. Said his cousin kept bees in the Ozarks, and it was the most peaceful thing he had ever seen. Said it would give me something to do with my hands that was not sitting at the kitchen table, rearranging salt shakers and pretending that counted as a life. He was right. The bees saved me, or at least they gave me a reason to walk outside in the morning. We built the apiary together over a long summer. 12 hive boxes, a small extraction shed, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, regular as church. Frank handled the smoker. I handled the frames. We made honey that first autumn that tasted like clover and stubbornness, and I gave jars of it to everyone I knew, including Josie, who analyzed the sugar content because she could not help herself. Those afternoons were the closest thing to happiness I had found since Ruth. And I know now that Frank was already planning. I know that somewhere during those golden Tuesdays, while I was lifting frames and talking to bees and feeling like maybe life had not entirely finished with me, Frank was looking at my land and seeing something I did not know was there. The lithium deposit. Josie explained it to me later, during one of those 72-hour windows when my brain was briefly mine. The geological survey had been done quietly by a mining company prospecting across the Ozarks region. Cynthia Ramirez, the attorney Frank used for the land transfers, had a contact at the company. She had tipped Frank off. The deposit under my 3 acres was significant. Not the largest in the state, but large enough that the rights alone were worth more money than either of us had ever seen. Frank did not tell me. Frank never intended to tell me. Instead, he modified the compound in the smoker fuel. I understood the chemistry of it now. My brain, finally clear, could see the molecular structure, the way I used to see it on the chalkboard in my classroom. A scopolamine derivative, adjusted for inhalation delivery. Reduced dosage for chronic exposure rather than acute effect. Elegant, in the way that terrible things sometimes are when you understand the engineering behind them. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 2 years, I had stood beside my best friend and breathed in the thing that was dismantling me. He would wait. An hour after we finished the hives, when my thoughts were starting to soften at the edges like wet paper, he would bring out the documents, sit at my kitchen table, point to the signature lines. Insurance paperwork, M. Liability updates for the apiary. Standard stuff. And I would sign because the words on the page looked like they might mean something, but I could not hold them still long enough to be sure. And Frank was there, and Frank knew what he was doing, and I trusted Frank the way I trusted gravity. 6 documents. 6 pieces of my land, signed away in a kitchen that still smelled like Ruth's coffee, by a hand that did not know it was being borrowed. Josie broke it open. She came for a weekend visit 14 months ago and sat across from me at dinner and watched me ask the same question 3 times in 20 minutes. She told me later that she went out to her car afterward and sat in the driveway for a long time. She did not cry. Josie does not cry when something is breaking. She plans. She took my blood to Dr. Calloway. She took a sample from the smoker on a Thursday when Frank was not around. She brought the results to Micah, who stared at them for a long time, and then said one word. Federal. Micah had spent 2 years at the paper covering financial crimes in the Ozarks. Shell companies. Land grabs. Forged documentation. He recognized the architecture of what Frank had built the way a carpenter recognizes a dovetail joint. He knew exactly which laws had been shattered and exactly which people to call. Within a month, Agent Darren Pike of the FBI had a file open on Frank Hubbard. And all of this, every piece of it, happened while I kept waking up every 3 days and calling Frank to ask if we were still on for Tuesday. I stood up from the chair. I walked to the window. The Ozark Hills were just barely visible in the early gray light, dawn coming on slow and reluctant the way it does in the mountains, like the sun is not entirely sure the world deserves another day and wants a minute to think about it. And I heard it. An engine on the dirt road. Then a second one. The first I recognized. The particular rattle of Josie's pickup. The one she refused to replace because Ruth had helped her buy it. The second engine was different. Heavier. Slower. Official. 2 vehicles coming up the red dirt road toward the cabin. I put my hand flat against the window glass and I waited. The door opened and Josie came through it first. She stood in the frame for a moment before she stepped inside, and I knew, not from anything she said, because she had not said anything yet. From the way she held herself, shoulders straight, chin level, eyes red but steady. The exact posture Ruth used to take when she walked into a room carrying news that was going to change the shape of the day, control on the outside. Everything else held somewhere behind the ribs, where no one could see it unless they knew where to look. I knew where to look. She crossed the cabin in 4 steps and I met her halfway, which is generous because my halfway was more of a stumble, and I held on to my daughter in that doorway for a long time without saying a word. She was shaking. Not the kind you can see from the outside. The kind that lives in the muscles, in the jaw, in the place between the shoulder blades where the body stores everything it has been refusing to feel. I held on and I let her shake, and I did not say it is okay, because it was not okay. None of this had been okay for a very long time. She pulled back first, wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, the way she had done since she was 6 years old, quick and almost irritated, like crying was an inconvenience she had not scheduled. She looked at me, and her voice came out steady because she was Josie, and steadiness was the inheritance her mother had left her. Dad, Do you remember? I looked at her, and I said the words slowly, because I wanted them to carry weight. I wanted her to hear every syllable, and know that I meant all of them. The smoke, the papers, the land, Frank, the video, the recording, Dr. Calloway, Cynthia Ramirez. All of it, Josie. Every single piece. She closed her eyes, just for a second. And when she opened them, the red was worse, but something behind it had loosened. Something that had been wound tight for a long time. It worked, she said, almost to herself. Dad, it worked. Micah came in behind her. He stood slightly to the side, the way he always did, hands in his jacket pockets, watching. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The kind that settles into a person when they have been carrying something heavy across a long distance, and were never entirely sure they were going to make it to the other side. I reached out and grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him in. He resisted for about half a second, which for Micah was practically throwing himself into my arms. And he made this sound, this short, hard exhale, like a man surfacing after being underwater for longer than his lungs were designed for. We stood there, the three of us, in a cabin that smelled like old wood and cold air, and the faintest trace of honey, and nobody spoke for a while, because some moments do not need language. They just need people standing close enough to feel each other breathing. Josie broke the silence first, because Josie always broke the silence first. Dad, this was the fourth time. I looked at her. The fourth time we brought you here. The first time, about 8 months ago, you made it to day 2, and then you panicked. You did not understand why you were alone. You walked out of the cabin at 3 in the morning, and made it almost 2 miles down the road before Micah found you. You were wearing one shoe. Micah said quietly from beside me, "You were really angry about the shoe situation. Would not stop talking about it. Very on brand." Josie gave him a look that could have peeled paint but continued. The second time, you stayed calm. Found the USB. Watched the video. But the memories did not come back far enough. You remembered Frank, but not the details. Not the dates. Not the documents. Not enough for testimony. The third time, she said, and her voice changed here, got quieter, got closer to the ground. You watched everything. You remembered almost all of it. You called me and said you understood, and that you were ready. And then Frank showed up at your house 2 days after we brought you back. He loaded the smoker with a higher concentration. And by the next morning you were calling me to ask what day it was. She stopped. I watched her jaw work the way Ruth's jaw used to work when she was holding something back that wanted very badly to come out. That was when I told Micah we were done waiting for the system to move on its schedule. I called Agent Pike myself. I told him we were doing this one more time, and it was going to be the last time because I was not going to watch my father disappear again. I put my hand on her shoulder. Not because I had words, because sometimes the hand is the word. Micah spoke then. We set it up differently this time. The video, the audio file, the honey jar. We mapped out every trigger that had worked partially before and stacked them together. Pike agreed to time the arrest to coincide with your recovery window. The moment you were clear, he moved. As if the universe had been listening for a cue, the cabin door opened again. A man in a dark jacket stepped in. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, the kind of face that has delivered difficult news so many times it has learned to stay neutral during the delivery. "Agent Darren Pike," he said. He did not offer his hand, which I respected. Some men understand that not every moment calls for formality. Mr. Ward, Frank Hubbard, was taken into custody 3 hours ago at a residence in Branson belonging to his brother Dale. We recovered the compound from a storage unit, along with 18 months of correspondence with a pharmacologist whose license was revoked in 2021. We also have the forged transfer documents and financial records linked to Cynthia Ramirez. The case is solid. He looked at me directly. When you are ready to provide testimony, we will need you. Your memory. Your clarity. Everything you can give us. I nodded. I am ready now, I said. I have been ready for 2 years. I just did not know it. Pike left. The heavy engine started outside and pulled away down the dirt road, and then it was just us. The three of us. The way it should have been from the beginning. We sat on the porch. The Ozark hills were turning gold in the late afternoon light, the kind of gold that looks like the world is briefly apologizing for everything it has put you through. Josie sat on my left, Micah on my right. The same positions they had taken on this porch every time apparently, though I only remembered this once. Your mom would have figured it out before any of us, I said. Josie looked at me and smiled through what was left of the tears. Where do you think I learned? Micah almost smiled. The way he always almost smiled. But this time he did not stop. This time he let it happen. A full, unguarded, unreserved smile. The kind Ruth used to say she lived for. I looked down at my hands. There was still a trace of dried honey on my fingers from the jar I had opened the morning before, and for the first time in 2 years, the smell did not carry fog with it, did not carry confusion or dread or the shadow of something sweet hiding something wrong. It was just honey, just clover and wildflower, and the memory of a summer when I built something good with my hands. It smelled like home, and I was finally here to know it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. For some reason I had imagined something grand, high ceilings and dark wood, and the kind of gravity you see in films where justice arrives with a soundtrack. But this was a federal courtroom in Springfield, Missouri, and it looked like what it was. A room where decisions were made under fluorescent lighting by people who had other cases waiting. I sat in the witness chair. The microphone was too close to my mouth, and I adjusted it the way I used to adjust the overhead projector in my classroom, with the quiet confidence of a man who has stood in front of rooms before and knows where the equipment should be. State your name for the record. Emmett James Ward. And Mr. Ward, are you currently of sound mind and full recollection? I looked at the attorney who asked it. Then I looked across the room at Frank Hubbard, who was sitting at the defense table in a suit I had never seen him wear. He looked smaller. Not physically. Something else. Diminished the way a man looks when the thing he built his confidence on has been taken out from under him, and he has not yet figured out how to stand without it. I am, I said. I am of entirely sound mind and full recollection, and I have been waiting 2 years to be able to say that honestly. I gave them 40 minutes. Dates. Dosages. The chemical composition of the compound as best I understood it from my training and from Josie's analysis. The names of the documents I had signed. The dates I had signed them. The condition I had been in when I signed them. The conversations Frank had with me before and after. The exact words he used when he handed me the pen. Insurance updates, M. Standard stuff. I described the smoker, the modified fuel, the sweet smell I had noticed once and then been told to ignore. I described the 72-hour cycles, the way each Tuesday bled into a fog by Thursday, and by Saturday, I could not remember what I had done on Wednesday. I described what it felt like to wake up in your own house and not recognize the papers on your own kitchen table, to call your daughter and ask her questions you had apparently asked her 2 days before, to feel your own mind slipping and believe it was age, to believe it was grief, to believe it was the natural consequence of losing the woman you loved and getting old in a house that was too quiet. I described what it felt like to find out it was none of those things. That it was a man with a smoker and a plan and 30 years of patience. The defense attorney stopped the recording twice. Both times he leaned over to Frank and whispered something I could not hear. Both times Frank stared at the table in front of him with the expression of a man watching the last of something drain away. Frank took a plea deal within the week. 6 counts of document falsification, 2 counts of land fraud, 1 count of chemical assault, resulting in documented cognitive impairment. The land was returned, all 6 parcels, every acre of dirt and limestone and lithium and clover that Frank Hubbard had tried to fold into his pocket while I stood next to him breathing in the smoke and calling him brother. I signed the papers to take it all back. And I want you to know how that felt. It felt like picking up a pen with a hand that finally knew what it was holding. The last time I saw Frank was across that courtroom. Right before the judge spoke. He looked at me. One look. And I could see him searching for something in my face. Forgiveness, maybe. Or maybe just confirmation that the man sitting in the witness chair was really the same man who had stood beside him in the apiary on all those golden Tuesday afternoons. I looked back. I did not speak. I did not nod. I did not need to. My memory was the answer. And he knew it. Springfield in the spring is something worth seeing if you ever get the chance. The dogwoods bloom first, then the redbuds, and the whole Ozark Plateau turns into something that looks like God reached down and decided this particular stretch of Missouri deserved an apology. I say that because I believe it. I believe God reaches down more often than we notice, and that most of the time his hand looks like the people he puts beside us. I went back to the bees. Not because I had to, because I chose to. I built a new smoker myself. Took me a full weekend, and it is not pretty, but it works. Cedar fuel. Real cedar. I check it every time. Josie bought me a testing kit as a birthday present, the real birthday this time, and I use it. She comes down from Kansas City most weekends, always brings a sample container. Just in case, she says. I tell her she is being paranoid. She tells me she is being a daughter. We are both right. Micah wrote a long-form investigation into land fraud across the Ozarks region. It ran as a 5-part series and was picked up nationally. He was nominated for an award I cannot pronounce, but that Josie assures me is significant. He still does not smile often. But when he does, he means it. And that is more than enough. I drink my coffee on the porch every morning. The bees start early, before the light is fully committed, and their hum carries across the field the way it always has. The same sound, the same vibration in the air. But it sounds different now. Not because the bees have changed. Because I have. I hear it clearly. Every note. Every morning. And I remember. Every single one. There is a verse Ruth kept on a card above the kitchen sink. I looked at it for years without reading it. The way you stop seeing things that are always there. But I read it now. Every morning. It says, "The Lord keeps watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore." I believe that. I believe he watched over my coming back. I believe he put Josie's stubbornness and Micah's silence and Ruth's instincts exactly where they needed to be. And I believe he gave the bees the sense to know who is real, because someone had to. If this story reached somewhere under your ribs, if it found that place where you keep the things you do not talk about at dinner, I am glad. That is where stories are supposed to land. Share it with someone who knows what it is like to trust a person who did not deserve it. Share it with someone who loves harder than they speak. And if you have not subscribed, I would consider it a kindness. Not for me, for the next story that might find you exactly when you need it. You can poison a man's memory. You can take his land and sign his name and stand in his kitchen and call him brother while the smoke does its work. You can take 2 years of his life and fold them up so small he does not even know they are missing. But you cannot fake what the people who love him are willing to do to bring him back. You cannot manufacture that. You cannot synthesize it in a lab, or load it into a smoker, or file it away in a courthouse. Some things are beyond chemistry. The bees always know.